It's all right.
I know what just was.
We need to fix that.
There's no winning.
So I used to do this whole long intro and it was cheesy as all heck. So I think what I'm gonna do this time is just give it to you guys, and if you could introduce yourselves and what you do here and who you represent.
We can make it interesting. I'll just introduce you. You can introduce me. All right, whenever, just jump in?
Jump in.
All right. My name's Paris with Hop River. Actually, this is Ben. I'm going to introduce him. Ben's my partner, and we started Hop River together. We do all things Hop River, so I'm not quite sure if the titles are appropriate. Yeah. So given that when things change, we tend to jump into all of it. But right now, Ben's been working in the taproom, working with our staff, making sure that we're providing a safe environment, considering that we're in the middle of a health crisis, but at the same time, I think we can still provide a good service and experience for people, just one, from a mental health standpoint, and also two, people need release as we go through things that are difficult. That's all I got.
Oh, I'm Ben, this is Paris McFarland. He's my co-founder, my partner. Doing this, we met 5 years ago?
5 years.
5 years now. I didn't grow up in Fort Wayne. I met Paris sort of through a common friend. We were both looking to do the same thing. Like Paris said, we do whatever is necessary. There's no real roles. It's just sort of, okay, this has to happen, so let's do that.
A constant firefighter trying to deal with situations.
Yeah. And particularly now, just trying to figure out what, how do we rearrange the tap room? This coronavirus has changed kind of our model a bit, because we're still a community space, but with communal seating and service at the bar, and basically just getting people together, and they had to sit wherever they could, and so they'd have conversation. And now we have to keep people more separate. We trying to just figure out the right balance of getting people in so they can enjoy themselves and have that release, but keep them safe, keep our staff safe. So it's an interesting time.
Well, before we get too far into everything, let's start drinking.
I think most everybody has a little bit of different, just because we've got a number of beers on tap. So it's sort of, you've got our Pilsner, Hazy Pale, which is Get Off My Lawn. You got Dad Brown, which is a nice light brown ale, and then Lasers, which is our flagship IPA.
So is that your recommended tasting order too?
It's really, you probably would. It's really however you want to do it. Some people do, there are a lot of people say there's unwritten rules about how you're supposed to do stuff. We try not to do that. We try to focus things so you can have a good taste of what's going on. But I think one of the things we've tried to do here is to get away from the elitism that is craft beer.
The snobby craft. Yeah.
And try to be as open as we can to whomever. I mean, there's it's craft beer. There's a little bit of hoidiness involved. Just presuming that you can do all this. Right. But we'd rather answer questions and talk to people about beer than tell them what they're supposed to like and how they're supposed to like it.
Normally I like semantics, so it's usually just by color. Because it's just more of a mental thing. It starts there. The first thing you see with beer is the color or the clarity. So it kind of, whether you realize it or not, it kind of informs your decision. So it's easier just to go that way, and then from there you let your palate take over. These aren't perfectly in color order, but it's just, in a lot of cases, color dictates flavor. As you get to a darker beer, in essence, not all the time, but you get to a heavier flavor. So that's why you start lighter. So it just keeps your palate from being overrun, so you can't taste kind of the quality of some of the lighter beers.
And for years, Lasers is our sort of bitterest beer, and so that's going to kill your palate anyway a little bit. So,
save that for the end.
Right. There's no perfect way to do it. Mine is Pilsner. I've got a black IPA. I've got our Dad Brown, and our Cantus Dry Irish Stout. So I may go around and do a few things.
I would encourage you to definitely start on your far left with the rules, our Pilsner. Every time I pour that, I'm always amazed at the clarity of that. That's a huge shout out to our brewer, Kevin Debs. It's one of the things he prides himself on, just making good, solid, clean German beers, just beer in general. But again, I can't help but like, wow, that's really clear. And I do it every time. It's like one of those weird things. It's like,
I feel growlers like our dark growlers. You sort of try to look through to see when, and with the Pilsner, sometimes you can't tell. In a clear glass you could obviously see it, but in the brown glass, you're like, where? Oh, look, we're almost full. Yeah. So it's the same thing. I'm impressed with how, you can't really see it from this distance, but it's a nice clear beer. It's a nice light beer. And
Nice tasting beer, yeah.
Yeah, really sort of traditional Pilsner style.
So you guys both have the rules, and I kind of have our American Goldfinch, which is our golden ale. Same thing. It's just a really light, clean beer. It's amazing, and I think one of the things we talked about initially was it was important that we got light beers. Another one of our kind of flagship light beers is our Kolsch. Those are great to have on tap, something like Pilsner, Kolsch, or the golden ale, just because we always get people come in. The first thing is like, I don't like craft beer. So it's kind of
that's
like
my closest Bud Light.
Yeah, well, not even that, but it's just kind of like sometimes I think it's just more flavors are intimidating. So like you get into certain flavors, like we know in more cases than not, we know what we don't like versus what we do like. It's harder to describe what you like than what you don't like. So it's easy to start someone there and work them up, and it's fun because we can give tastes and they can go A and B. Like I like the flavor of this, I like that, and it gives. We have a great bar staff that are really good at listening, so it gives us something to work with when you say like I like these flavors of this beer. But then also too, it comes back to kind of our core goal and. Been talked about just not being so unapproachable or elitist, but it allows us to bring people in and say, okay, like let's keep it simple. You like this, you don't like that, let's go here, let's try this. And the next thing you know, they've landed on, hey, I really like that one, I'll take a pint of that. And it's amazing how many people I think we all run into is like, people say, it's like, I don't drink beer, but I drink your beer.
Right. Well, so yeah, we call them gateway beers, like the Kolsch or the Pilsner. They're still fantastic beers and really high quality, but they're easy to drink.
Yeah.
Not intimidating, not not too boozy, not they don't. I think for all of our beers, and what Kevin tries to do is find a nice balance, no matter what it is. We are not we're not the quadruple dry hops, dump a kettle sour, make a bunch of crazy.
I can think of a couple breweries,
which are great, and I like those beers sometimes, and they are fantastic, and if done well, they're just really delicious. But that's not our thing. Everybody's got their niche, and we're trying to sort of be a little bit more broad in our appeal, and also just give people a good baseline of okay, this is. Our interpretation of what a good beer is, not saying it's better than anybody else, but when you come here, everything is going to be the best quality. You're going to get what you expect and a lot more. And
was that purposefully done? Were you at the beginning of this planning out and saying we want to be a more approachable brewery?
I think a little bit. I think we just kind of some of the things we've done, and then we've also fell into that space, and also like the skill set that Kevin brought into this. And I think the story for me adds into that is I'm sitting here thinking it's like the best. I think it's like 2 beer cheers, and the reason I say that is and I think Ben remembers this. Kevin always said the best compliment you could give a brewer is having a second.
Right.
It's like having a beer that like, oh, that was great. It's like, what else do you have? Versus like, hey, that was really good. I enjoyed it. Hit all the right notes for me. Let's do it again.
Right.
So, we can all just experiment and try a lot of things, but the compliment comes when you want to try it again versus just kind of bounce around. And that's different for everyone, but it's interesting because there's always something that stuck with me that resonated with him was when people tried it again or had another one, because it wasn't so off the wall or so like palate wrecking that it's just like I can do one of those or half of those and like
right.
Yeah.
And I think we like Paris said, some of it we sort of fell into as we developed the plan for this place and then started bringing people on board and saw what the community sort of wanted and what sort of community we wanted to build. And so, it goes, it's not just the beer, but also with the events that we've got and the way that we're set up, that we're trying to bring as many people in who might not think about, a brewery as the first thing. Fort Wayne wasn't the hotbed of craft beer, for a long time, and or Indiana or whatever. And
That's changing.
It is, and we're glad to be part of that. Just with a bunch of breweries opening up, and what's that, dot lines opening up in the next few weeks. That there's enough people out there that are willing to try something and then try to find a place that they like, and we're just trying to be the place they keep coming back to.
Yeah.
And we've got customers that I know are hopheads and will go or want some kettle sour or something crazy, but they come here, they buy their kegs here for their home beer because they know that what they want to drink at the end of the night or the end of the day, or what their go-to is something clean and good and the best quality that they can have a couple of instead of just having one and being like, okay, I'm done.
Yeah. That's great.
And that's a good segue. So like the second beer on yours is Get Off My Lawn. Yep, right there. So that's our hazy pale. Everyone knows kind of the New England hazy beer trend has just definitely been around for a while.
Is it over yet? The haze craze?
I don't think it's over. I'll be honest. I love New England IPAs. I love anything with intense flavors. It's one of those things that makes you kind of think about like what you like in beer, and that can come from whether a stout. I've had some great stouts, and just all beer. I love kind of the complexity of flavor, the intenseness of flavor, and then how it just kind of, it's almost like riding a roller coaster. It's like you can feel it start, you can taste it finish. But that one was one, we haven't done a ton of hazy stuff, but that one came out, and I think a lot of people like it. It's a really sessionable, easy drinking beer. It's not overbearing.
It's almost effervescent. Like it's only 4.4% or something. It's not a boozy beer.
Yeah.
But it's a little higher carbonation. And I think that technically speaking, hazies are actually kind of hard to make if you don't fake it. Because what a lot of places do, they'll throw flour in. They'll make it hazy or leave a bunch of yeast in, or that will settle out over time. So the goal is to sell it as fast as you can before that haze settles out. And what Kevin was trying to do was find a beer that was a little bit more stable, longer term, which is a lot harder to do, to find the right ingredients that, in a 3 or 4 weeks sitting in the cold, everything's going to start settling out, and all of a sudden you got a clear beer. Still tastes great, but you don't have that same appearance and that same mouthfeel. And so he spent a lot of time sort of experimenting on how to do that. And I think he's working on another one right now, a little bit bolder. But also, the hazy or the New Englands where they don't have much bittering hops. So there's not bitter at all. It's a lot of aroma hops that go in, and trying to find that right balance of here's a bunch of aroma. I mean, it's easy. It's sort of like the original IPAs where people just dumped in a bunch of hops and try to make it as bitter as possible. You can cover up a lot of flaws.
Yeah.
But and then as more beers came out, people are like, oh no, this is just bitter and bad, not bitter and good. And I think that's happening with the New Englands, is that people dumped in a bunch of stuff and tried to make it as floral or whatever as possible, and now people are like, well, wait a minute.
I'm starting to see what's a good one and what's not.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right. As that style, I guess, matures, if that's the right word.
Is Heroes and Villains a small batch?
Heroes and Villains is a small batch. Yeah.
And the reason I ask that is, so one of the things that we were conscious of, and I think, everyone's influence in different things in their beer, and Kevin's very English and German influence. So we have good IPAs, and we're seeing more of them this time of year. It's interesting because, just like most breweries, our schedule kind of changes. We tend to like heavier, a little more boozy beers in the winter, lighter, more effervescent in the summer. But I bring that up so like, we've done several different IPAs or light pales, especially this time of year, and we do that in a small batch system. So one of the things we constantly see, and it's one that I have, is Heroes and Villains, and I enjoy it just because I like because I like New Englands, I tend to like something that's not as bitter. So moving kind of your flavor more forward rather than bitter on the back end. But it's always fun to see the small batch stuff that comes out. And I think we've had several beers that have went small batch, so we've taken a big batch. So just part of that development process. And even in that is, we talk about like connecting kind of like the rules and how clean it is and crisp and the clarity of the beer and taking kind of that real technical aspect that Kevin has and then applying it to how he develops a recipe for like Get Off My Lawn. Right. So, I mean, you can't fake technical skill. So it's always good to have that, and it's fun to see that come through in other ways. And even if it's things that traditionally he may not brew, but it's always, I mean, again, whatever you brew, it's hard to remove your skill from that. So it makes it fun, and as we try new things, and one of my things that I like doing is just always making sure I try at least just a small sample of the new things, just to like kind of bucket list, like I've tried that, at least know what the flavor is. Because there's always something new, whether it's us transforming a beer. We did some bombers, limited edition bombers.
Yeah, we did with some barrel aged stuff, a mix of stouts and barrel aging those, and then we did we did our laser cannon, which was basically a barley wine based stuff. It was the first running software lasers, and they don't go so nice, like 13%.
Oh yeah.
Heavy thing, and part of that was just driven by the current times. We were closed for 2 change months, at least the straight up tap room. So how can we do some carry out stuff? How do we keep some beer flowing somehow, or use things that if they sit around too long, I mean, it's beer. It's not, we don't filter it or pasteurize it, so it's got a shelf life. And so when you tack 2 months onto everything, you want to try to figure out how best to move it so you can still get good fresh beer to people before you got to dump it down the drain.
We can move on, but I really wanted to touch on just the Corona in general. We've talked about it a little bit here and there, but I mean, what have you guys been doing? How's it been affecting you guys? You guys still going strong? Just touch on what's been going on.
So, I mean, the big thing with coronavirus is, I mean, it just throws a new set of challenges. And I think the hardest part was like accepting that it has disrupted everything. Because I think up until then, like just being a startup, and we had been open for 2 years, and we were like reaching that point where, you're climbing the hill, you're seeing the sun cresting, and you're like, and then coronavirus. Mm-hmm. So it definitely created some challenges. I think naturally, like we just kind of pulled back. I will say I am thankful that like between like our skill sets and just the planning that we naturally do, and I think I would be remiss if there weren't frustrations all around. Everyone's found frustrations in this, but I think our natural skill sets and just all the people that we have here made it possible for us to have a response. And the reality is like there was no perfect response, just because I remember it's almost looking back, it was almost, dare I compare it to D-Day, but it was just a little bit of, it feels like the Sunday before we got shut down, like everybody knew it was coming, and it was like just a party. Like, let's just go. But from the back end business, we had to kind of rapidly make decisions, and it really is changing by the hour. And I remember we were waiting for the press conferences from the governor, and like, what's he gonna do? How's he gonna extend it? I feel like we did a good job as best we could have. We probably, being a small company without a ton of minds to put behind this.
And a ton of money to put behind.
And a ton of money. So we made calculated responses. I think it has put us in a position to be open after this. And I think, that was one of the things we settled in on, is like our ultimate goal has to be coming on the other side of this and being here when this is done. So there were just in essence, a lot of our decisions were twinged with that. It's just focusing on what does this look like when it's over, or when we get on the other side, because I think over is the wrong word.
Right.
How do we prepare? And that's where our decision to kind of shut down for a short period of time, because unfortunately, it's like you were seeing the decline in restaurants and then the ultimate closure. Mm-hmm. So we had to make the tough decision. The best thing to do was preserve resources right now, because no one could say how long this was gonna go. And that ended up probably being kind of our saving grace, and just idling and just kind of hibernating for a little bit to allow us to get to a point where it made sense to to get back open.
Yeah, and it's still, I think, a challenge now. I mean, people are hesitant coming back out. I mean, I think every bar or restaurant's job is to get as many people in a room as possible and have them make bad decisions. And so, right now you have to be, there's the business part of it, and there's sort of the moral public health, like how much do you open, how do you fashion it so that you have some semblance of, keeping people make their own decisions, and we sort of allow them to do that. But at the same time, our staff, we need to keep them safe, because if they want to work, and we want them to work, how do we do it in a way that isn't just throwing them in the pool? And it's going to be an interesting time for everybody. I mean, restaurants and bars are opening, but we see it, and all of our customers see it. We have both sides. We have our distribution customers, bars and restaurants and liquor stores, and everybody shut down. So that was just sort of a weird thing. And as everybody opens back up, like how many people are going to come? How do we need to change our model to try to meet people where they are? I mean, that's, again, part of the community aspect of our thing, is meeting people where they are, not telling them where they should be. Mm-hmm. So how do we, increase sale, like carry-out sales, or how do we make that convenient and safe for people? We're doing this Growler Exchange program, so we don't have to sit and sanitize your growler while you wait in a space. You come drop off your dirty one, we have a bunch of clean ones ready to go, we swap those out, so it's sort of a quicker thing. And I think after we started doing that, a number of breweries in town were doing that, because it just made it a more efficient way to do things. And same thing, like, well, how can we have growlers now, these 32-ounce cans, and a number of other breweries in town and lots around the country have them, but it's just another package for us to be able to get something together and sell it to people in a way that was convenient and convenient and safe for them. So yeah, I think it's, the economy is generally going to be a challenge for everybody. It's not bars and restaurants, it's just trying to figure out what you can do to get through it, because there's no, it's not like next week, it's all done.
Yeah. I've seen a lot of industries, I think in the restaurant and craft beer industries in particular, that some of the decisions they're making during this shutdown time will be long-term, just because they found that, hey, if I do carry out in this way, it just makes sense.
Sure.
Are you seeing any of those processes that you're implementing now, which may be a long-term implementation?
I would guess yes, and I think what I've seen and what I feel, and I've had two businesses that have been affected by this. One is being Hop River, but this is, for me, I look at it like there's a whole side of this that is just not good, just kind of health crisis and how it affects individuals and families. And looking at it from like a business standpoint, and when I say business, is like our responsibility to our stakeholders, being like our employees and our customers. I feel like we've approached this, and I approach this as an opportunity. So what's been happening is like how we thought we needed to operate, and this is just for any business, has been challenged. And Ben kind of alluded to it a little bit, but like we were built to really focus on our tap room. And that was how a lot of breweries were built, and that's not a bad model by any means. But when you overlay that with a public health crisis, it definitely forces you to rethink your model and how we serve our customers, that in turn allows us to serve our other stakeholders in general. So we've made kind of those decisions in between there, and some of those for us were around like packaging. But I don't think it's going to be the end of it, because you're going to see long-term effects of this and how consumers make decisions, how people decide to come out. Now, I'm a firm believer it doesn't mean that there isn't, we've lost all of our economic viability. I think people are still spending dollars. How they're spending it has changed more so. So it's kind of up to us to respond in course and make sure that we're providing the services and the wares and just the beer that we have been, and just meet them where they're at. So again, we were kind of joking about how we all picked up habits of enjoying libations at various parts of the day, sometimes a little broader than we normally would have.
We won't talk about what time it is right now.
But at the same time,
whenever you put this up.
Yeah.
But what's different about that is people are doing it at home. So it doesn't mean that people are drinking less or doing anything less in that space. It just means where they're doing it has changed. So how do we capture that? And there's a number of businesses you can look at and say is like, okay, they're still using your product or trying to interact with you, but it's just different now. So I think that's where we are working on and we continue to work on, and that's going to be that long-term effect. I also think this is a perfect time for any business to learn crisis management. I think, hindsight being 2020, like I feel like we have made good broad decisions. There's always like little in-between things you can do better, but that from a long-term standpoint, because when a lot of the experts talk about this, they don't talk about, hey, this is when this is going to stop. They talk about, well, this is going to be a thing that comes back. So I think preparing for that, and that being a long-term effect from both planning, execution, and then how do we come to market and how do we find customers anymore?
Yeah, and I think that there's, online ordering and takeout, like carry out, will continue for anybody who hadn't been doing it. Like it wasn't a big thing for us before. Growler sales and whatnot, you count that as carry out, but people affirmatively saying like, I want your beer, but I don't want to sit in the tap room.
Yeah.
And how do I do that? We had cans and whatnot at liquor stores, but trying to bring as much of that in-house, and how to figure that out, because that's going to stay. There's going to be some segment of the population that, until there's a vaccine or whatnot, that just wants to do that, and it makes sense for us to try to leverage what we've got to do that. Mm-hmm. And there's at some point there's also just the larger sort of macroeconomic things that there's nothing we can do about. We just try to do the best that we can through that time, and try to put ourselves in the best position to sell our beer to as many people that want to buy it.
So we already kind of you've downed yours.
Sorry.
So I think you have a different one than I do, and so do you. So can we touch on the second one for both of you guys?
Sure. So mine was a small batch Heroes and Villains, just another IPA that we did. But this one is Space Tiger Charlie. This has just kind of been a series we've been doing of our lasers, which you have. You have our base lasers. Mm-hmm. We've been dry hopping with different versions of hops just to kind of impart different flavor characteristics. I just like stuff like that because it's just fun. Also, Space Tiger Charlie just seems like a call sign. So it just makes it fun and interesting because I think we had Alpha, Bravo, and Charlie.
Sort of working our way through the NATO phonetic alphabet. So we'll just keep doing a different one every week. Right.
Yeah.
We've got these bung-sided kegs that we can, we put in a keg of lasers, put in a sock of some sort of hop, some hop mix, and dry hop it, and then just keg it and sell it for the week. And they don't last more than a week or 10 days, which is fine because that's we sell it through, but it gives sometimes it's just amping up the flavors that are regular in lasers, sort of a mosaic and citra sort of blend. Sometimes going somewhere different, Sriracha yeast or some, or something else just to give it a different characteristic altogether. But it's just a fun thing. And my second one was Moonlighter. That's our black IPA. It was sort of an experiment for us. It was a big batch, but it was it's an interesting mix of, you get that sort of, it looks really dark, like it looks like it's going to be a really that dark malty beer, but it really isn't. There's some biscuit to it just in the flavor, but a nice balance. I think a lot of times with the black IPA, you get folks that take like essentially a stout recipe and throw extra hops into it, and so the balance is all off. So this is more, you look at it and it looks like it's going to be dark. You drink it, no, it's more, there's a little bit of that maltiness and that sort of bitterness from the malt, like from the roasted malts. But most of it comes through on the hops, and it just ends up being really an easy drinking beer. And part of it's just getting people past that looks like a dark beer. No, have a taste.
Yeah.
And then they're like, oh, that's good. Paris said early on, appearance means a lot when you're looking at a beer and trying to figure out what people's original or initial impressions, what they think they're going to be. And then trying to give at least a little bit of education to get them past that if they think that they're not going to like it. At least have them taste it. And if they still don't like it, great. Whatever. I don't expect everybody to like everything that we make, but I think that there's at least one thing on the menu that everybody can find and drink.
Sorry, I was just checking my notes, make sure I'm getting everything.
We'll just keep talking.
Well, that's kind of what I like doing in this is it's just a casual conversation, and then people get to enjoy it at home.
Right. Now, is this going on the YouTube channel?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
The channel's called Blue Collar Booze. Plug.
Dig it.
I like it.
Dig it.
And it's not just craft beer. We do wine. We do. I haven't done wine yet because I don't know much about it, but.
Should connect you with our wine dealer.
Distilleries too. I did Edwin Co. But,
Oh, nice.
I like those guys are really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Have you talked?
No, I've met them several times. I was at an event with them, and I mean, I love their sour mash.
Yeah.
Sounds really good. They made me drink with the sour mash. I'm like, ooh.
Okay.
Did you reach out to the Kikiyanga guys if you haven't done them?
I did. I reached out and I'm hoping to do them soon. So.
Okay. Yeah, Logan. Those guys, both of them are really cool. Logan and Tyler.
Yeah. I mean, everybody seems to be, whether it's breweries, distilleries, cideries, the wineries a little bit, we haven't had as much contact with, but we started this, the group of us started this Northern Indiana Beer Trail, basically just to part of it's marketing, just letting people know that we're here, but also to try to get together as a group to help learn what each other is doing, share challenges. Nowadays it's even more important, but just to we have this little passport, little stamps, a little map to show you where in northern Indiana, up to the border, up to the Michigan border, and over, I think, as far as what Elkhart. I don't know about that.
Is Goshen in there?
Goshen's in there.
Yeah.
Just to whether it's Fort Wayne or just northern Indiana, for the longest time, craft beer in Indiana was Chicagoland, and sort of around with Three Floyds and 18th Street and whatnot, or Indianapolis and Bloomington sort of in there.
Yeah.
And everybody else was, and that's great with Sun King and Three Floyds and Uplands, like they've been the biggest hitters, and so they had the most resources, and I get it. But we wanted something that was a little bit more focused on our region, that we could control a little bit more and get people to really pay attention to that there's more out there. I mean, there were a couple hundred breweries in Indiana now, I think we were just shy of. And a lot of people just don't know about them. We still get people that haven't heard about us. And as much as, it's not surprising in the grand scheme of things, but when you're in the middle of it, you're like, we're putting all this stuff out, and you think everybody knows.
Yeah.
And then somebody comes in, like, I didn't even know you guys were here. I'm like,
You live under a rock?
But it's also an opportunity. You're like, all right, well, one, I know that there's things that we can do to reach more people that haven't been in here. And two, that whatever we're doing is starting to reach those folks and getting them to come in here and try something. And that gives us the opportunity to convert them to either craft beer in general or to us specifically as a place. And that, as Paris said, we have really good bar staff that are really, and even in the brewing staff that are really interested in the conversation about something, not just like, what do you want? All right, here's your thing, go. But
it's a learning experience when they come in.
Yeah, and again, trying to be as welcoming as possible, and understanding that there will be group. We sell Kikiyanga cider here. We have local wines just for folks who don't want it. We don't want this place to be so exclusive that unless you drink our beer, you don't come in. Same thing with our kitchen. Our chef Zach, we saddled him with essentially a food truck kitchen. Probably worse than that, because still also the sinks are in there too.
Get people in here. You have this much space. Do it.
Yeah, and he's been like the things that he's turned out. He's limited in what he can do, but the things that he's done with it have been fantastic.
Good.
And that people, more than I think we ever anticipated, food being a thing here. It has become a thing here, and so all of that just you learn as you go. Right? You learn what the customers want and what the community wants, and then you try to lean into that as much as you can.
No, I mean, I agree. And it's interesting because, one of the things I think in my head is like, I don't know, too many people said I just want to sit at home and drink alone. So it's like inherently, it's inherently like collaborative and kind of community. Exactly. So, and you see that through it, and you hear that a lot about the craft brewing industry. A lot of people that work together and surprised at like what would be competitors are working together towards the same things. And ultimately, it's been trying to drive people to craft beer away from macro or just exposure, just pure exposure. And it's easier to do that as a group. That's why you see the proliferation of like beer festivals and why they're so important, because it's a chance for people to either go as groups or just get exposed to a number of different beers. And it's interesting because it's just like anything in life is like, we can brew a Pilsner or a IPA and have one person like it, but someone's like, that's just not my thing, but I like this one over here. And it's great because I think of craft brewing as an industry where you may not like our beer or our version of that beer, but there's probably one that you will like. So, because there's so many different takes, and that's the fun part. It's so creative, and like you can give someone the same ingredients and even if it's the same system, and still get completely different things. Kind of what got me into brewing and even home brewing, and then now owning a brewery was I just wanted to be an alchemist. It was kind of fun. This is what I thought about. It's like, oh, that's why I like it. You just get to be creative, a little pinch of this, a little pinch of that. But it is that. It's very cool, and just to see kind of the creative types and the people and just that are very passionate about their craft, and also sharing it with other people. That's why you see a lot of home brewers kind of come into this, and people who make a profession. It's rewarding in so many different ways, just whether it be from the people, the things you get to create, the beers you get to create that have become cult followings. So it's all fun.
Yeah, and I think our area has gone. One of the reasons that I wanted to come here, my wife grew up in Fort Wayne, but I wasn't here, but I could see that it was a town and an area that was starting to find its own voice. When I started visiting here, when we were dating a long time ago, you got the sense just from an outsider that people here went elsewhere to find cool things. Like, we'll go to Michigan for this, or we'll go to Chicago, go down to Indy, or go to, if it's beer, either Indy or Chicagoland, or go up to Dark Horse or whatever it was. But there's no real good reason for it, aside from there just weren't the opportunities here to have that. And then one of the reasons that Paris and I started this place, and that I've been gratified to see other places open up, is that it's giving people the opportunity to say, no, I can find those things here. I don't have to drive an hour and a half to find something good. And whether it's, breweries, restaurants, and just other manufacturing like that, the idea that you can find that good stuff here. There are good people here making good things. And I think that's where sort of brewing as an industry is going more local. It isn't necessarily all hyper local, just like tiny nano, although you get that, and those fill a niche and they're fantastic. But that you don't, that folks don't need to go to the liquor store to find, unless they really want something from Chicago or from LA or whatever that is, some widely distributed beer, because they want to try it, but they want a good beer, and they want to support their local community, and they know that they can now get that quality and selection here in Fort Wayne and in northern Indiana, but not just at Hop River. That's part of the purpose of the guild and the passport, is to show people, look, here are all these choices that you can make without going all that far, and you can find something you can support, and find 2 tons with crazy IPAs and barrel aged stuff, and Portlandia with the Nano, where they just have a lot of selection going on, or Summit City with 30 beers on tap. Like everybody's got their niche, that you can find both a beer that you like and an atmosphere that you like, but you don't have to drive for an hour and a half between things to find them, or go to Grand Rapids and be like, I'm just going to, bob to for every, have a beer in each place just to say that I did. You can stretch it out over a week, visit a dozen breweries in town and around, and have a fantastic experience with really good beer.
Good. So let's jump into our third one.
Okay. You and I have Dad Brown.
Okay.
So this is really just a traditional brown ale. Not too, where I can't remember. Yeah, 5.2%. So not too boozy and not too bitter.
That's an easy drinker too.
Yeah, Kevin was working really on, he's always, again, trying to find that balance of something that drinks easily, even if it's a stronger, or, because you get, we don't use, aside from maybe on Get Off My Lawn, but even in that, we don't use much else aside from grain and hops and yeast. So how do you make those different, how do you find those different flavor profiles just from that stuff without dumping something else in? And so using a few different kinds of biscuit malts to get that kind of traditional English brown flavor with a nice clean yeast. It just drinks nice and easily. You have a little bitterness on the back end, but it's not. It's not overpowering. I don't even what you have. That's your space station.
Yeah. That was a Charlie. No.
Come back to that.
Yeah, no, I'm drinking it already, and I like it. It's just our dry hopped laser, so just kind of not really an experimental, but just a transformation. Yeah.
So you've got now number 4 is, well, for yours is our flagship IPA. That's Lasers. So and that's it's a straightforward Citra Mosaic. So you get that a little bit of dank, but mostly that citrusy sort of, and a nice blend of bitterness at the end, and a nice clean beer. I mean, it's.
Oh yeah, that's awesome.
And I've got our Countess, which is our dry Irish Stout. The pandemic hit right at St. Patrick's Day.
Oh,
so
yeah.
We had just come out with a whole bunch of Irish Stout. And we actually changed this up from last year. It's a little bit, there's a little bit of, it's not rye, a little less rye, so it's a little bit sweeter than we had last year, but still that smoothness, and I can't remember, there's some malted barley in there. I can't remember what else Kevin threw in, because I forgot to look it up before we started. But it has sort of some of that Guinness taste, but not, and some of that smoothness. It's not a nitro beer, and we're trying to copy that, but really get to a traditional dry Irish Stout that was, again, 4 and something %. So you can, it looks heavy, but it isn't all that heavy.
Yeah.
Yeah, and my last one is Wingspan, which is our Weizenbach, and if I'm saying this correctly, I think we use the yeast off of the
Harrison Street.
our Hefeweizen, which is Harrison Street. It's nice because in some cases we get new beers because we don't want to pitch the yeast, so we can see what can we redevelop or develop using the same yeast. So we'll just go from that beer to the next beer with yeast, and we get something new like the Weizenbach. Yeah, it's good. I like it. It is definitely a little heavier. It's 7.7, but
it's like a boozy banana bread.
Right.
That sounds awesome. So
it's really good. It's really good. It really is good.
There's bananas.
Using that same yeast, you get the banana and cloves, and we use the Hefeweizen yeast for our Harrison Street, and sort of go for that, at least on the Harrison Street, that's sort of the flavor profile. Not overpowering, just a little bit. The booziness of the Weizenbach brings that out a lot more. And, a little bit different grain bill, so it's a bit not just boozy, but meatier as well.
It's when you layer in the middle.
Have that, and you can go back. It's the same thing, like the Doppelbock that we've got, the Greater Heron. sort of like our. It isn't, but when trying to describe it, it's like our Vienna lager, but turned to 11. But that's Melgoin and malt, that's sort of heavier, but then amped up with extra boozy. But that booziness brings out a lot of the different flavors and sort of amps them up both in taste and aroma. There's a good time where Wingspan was my go-to, sort of my start. And that usually happens when we come out with a new beer. I'm like, oh, I'll drink that for a while.
Yeah.
And so Pilsner and Get Off My Lawn have been my go-tos for the past couple of months, past month.
I wanted to jump into you guys' story a little bit. Like, how'd you guys even meet?
I was just slumming it around.
Yeah.
at a green table in the corner, the window dash in.
There you go.
I think we were both, we tell the story a lot, we were both looking at doing something like this. And we had been talking to a common friend. Somebody I had met and sort of befriended, and Paris had known for a long time, and he introduced us. And we, from that, we're like, oh, you're kind of looking at the same thing. Why don't we see if it works working together? Mm-hmm. So I still live in BC, so we long distance dated for a while.
I'm glad to see it worked out.
Yeah.
Well, as Paris tells it, every day it's like waiting for are we still doing this? We're still, you can stop at any time. I can stop anytime I want.
Yeah. Well, it was a joke back and forth. We said we'll just go till one of us just says it doesn't work, and then next thing you know, it's like, oh, guess we're opening a brewery. Well, and I think the value in that is what we want to do definitely was ambitious, and even more so looking back on it now, because you'd always go back and say, maybe we tweak this or that, but we started with a pretty good sized project, and it was helpful because we had different backgrounds, but we could both understand what each other were doing. Ben was a lawyer, my background's in finance, and I'd run small business before, so just coupling that together, it was perfect for a brewery because there's a lot of bureaucracy in getting it done, and just kind of when it comes to whether applying for licenses and things like that, and just getting set up, that was super helpful. So we really kind of naturally divided along those lines. So, and I think that's kind of feel like what we saw, when we worked on the business plan, we could kind of divide it and tackle it that way. As we got going, and I think we got to a point, I feel like we were going, and just like everyone, you have that story. We have all the cliche entrepreneur stories. We have the napkin drawings of our logo. We have the bank notes, and then coming together and saying what are we doing? We're gonna focus on this until where we got funded, and then
spouse is saying, "Are you really serious?"
Right.
We got to sign too, so make sure you're really into this. Yeah.
So it's fun thinking back on that journey because it's gotten us here. But the biggest thing is it's just a journey every day, and sitting here thinking, it's oh man, I'm not my best self right now through this pandemic. But at the same time, I am, and and this is me just being personal, I try to tell Ben as much as possible, and I know sometimes we're may not always fire on all cylinders, but I always appreciate him because together, I feel like we balance each other out, because sometimes I'll go high and he goes low. Sometimes I go low and he goes high. Right. But I think what we found in this is we can do our due diligence and we can come to a reasonably agreed on direction, and that's helpful. And I think our common phrase for that is that's fair.
That's fair. All right, we can do that. Yeah, this is not been a small endeavor. Anybody who starts, even the smallest brewery, it's not, it may be a matter of degree, but not kind, of the difficulties that are involved. And we've been ambitious about it, both in our size of production and the size of the space and what we'd like to do. And so it takes I think the two of us in our different skill sets. And hoping to match up our emotional, wherever we are, so that we're not both down at the same time. Because Paris has two businesses he's working on, and so he sees these challenges double. And both of us have family, just the normal thing that any small business owner has to deal with. And then just the pandemic amplifies it, of trying to make sure you take care of yourself, your staff, and your family, and your customers, and trying to still be a part of the community, and come out, whatever the other side is, as stronger than you went in. So yeah, I could never have done this on my own. He might have been.
No, again, it's like I disagree with that. I agree with this first statement. It's my other business is a hobby shop, and it's a little bit easier, but like this, there's so many more complexities to it. And just working with people and personalities, and like there's a gift and the curse of all of that. But I think looking back, the reason we kind of found each other and we were both able to start a brewery is because we had each other. And the reality, you start removing one of the pieces, and you think of, And I remember when we were it feels like ages ago, but I remember when we were working late at night, building this bar. Right. We'd leave at 6 o'clock and we'd pass our wives as they were getting up, getting ready for work. Yeah. So what I've found and what's important is when it comes down to it, I think we're both here. And again, I think this has been a challenging time, but at the end of the day, it's we're still both here. And I think you ebb and you flow, and we approach things differently, but at the same time, he pulls me when I need to be pulled, I pull him when he needs to be pulled, and I think that's the important part. Right. Because and I remember just a point when we were planning this process where we were kind of having this conversation. I think it was our first no from the bank. And initially, we had this ambitious things we're gonna buy this building, we're gonna renovate it, we're gonna start a brewery, we're gonna do all these things. It's only money. They'll give us all this money, we need to do that. And then I think that kind of the common phrase became, our focus is to start a brewery, not own a building. Right. And just, so.
The banks are essentially you can do one or the other. Buy a brewery or start a brewery.
But
what do you want to do?
Yeah, and that just became a part of the bigger thing where, at the end of the day, okay, let's figure out where we're trying to get to and get there. And sometimes it hasn't been perfect, but I look at it as we're still going through this, and everyone, and just whatever it comes down to, every business has to make a very personal decision in how they approach this and what the other side looks for them. We're doing our best to go through that, and I think if you ask our staff, we're not perfect at that, but we're trying to get better every day. So, and just as much as we started this in the early years, it's important to say that we learn from our staff, and I appreciate the fact that they challenge us to be better, and it's not just getting in the face of them, but just asking questions that force us to think. It's you're right, we need to be more clear on this, or we really need to work on that. So just because we started this, it didn't mean that it stops with us, and we did that. We have a great team behind us. We have amazing spouses that give us the flexibility and the room to be, what's the word I'm looking for? To make the mistakes that we make. But again, just as much as we are outwardly about community for this brewery, but behind the scenes is just as much too. So I think that's a great place to kind of sum this up. It's this whole thing is not just us, it's a whole community that's built this.
Yeah, what he said.
Absolutely.
I think that for us and for everybody, everybody decides what their comfort level is, but come down, if you haven't been here before, if you haven't tried our beer before, either come down, take a look at our menu, try to support, the local. I think it's important now more than ever that people show their support for local businesses, and recognize that the skill and the effort that's put in is worthwhile, and that I think that if they haven't had us before or tried us before, they will be pleasantly surprised and give us a chance to convert them.
No, I agree. I think Ben said it well, and I think it's important that supporting local businesses, but I think just in that, just finding pride in your local businesses because they're part of the community. They do it for the community. It's not like we're trying to go out and convert everyone in the U.S. We really are. I'm okay being in other states, but at the same time, this is our home. So we want to make sure that home's taken care of and people enjoy the experience. And we have shared experiences here. So, yeah, I think we can really accomplish that.
Yeah, I think that for a lot of people, this time is shown or giving people the opportunity to take pride in their local businesses. Those are people, they employ your friends and neighbors. They provide lots of the products that you use and expect. Come on down and show us some love, and we'll show you some love in return.
Mm-hmm. Sounds good.
All right.
Awesome. Yeah, that was awesome. Thanks, guys. Nice. Yeah. Is that something you do?
Yeah, I think it.